Hello and welcome to RAF Cottesmore in Rutland. We're at the world's biggest military air show, the Royal International Air Tattoo, with this year more than 350 aircraft from 30 nations.
The parking line here stretches for almost a mile in each direction, and so do the crowds, but it's the flying they're here to see, and in this programme we'll be bringing you the very best of the action.
We'll be celebrating the show's 30th birthday with some of the world's great display teams like the Frecce Tricolore from Italy. We'll be looking back at some of the most important aircraft in history, the Avro Lancaster and the Hawker Hunter.
We'll also be looking to the future. The RAF have two new aircraft in service, the C-130J Hercules and the giant Boeing C-17. We'll also take a glimpse at the aircraft which could eventually replace the Harrier.
Plus the role of women in aviation. In the last war they delivered Spitfires. Now they're prepared to fly into battle.
But we start with a display which last came to the show 6 years ago. They're the team Iskra from Poland. They fly TS-11 jet trainers, and it's over to our show commentator, Sean Maffin.
Well, if you think this looks a bit 1960s-ish, well, that's exactly what it is. These aeroplanes first flew in February 1960, and they've been the advanced trainer for the Polish Air Force since about 1963. Elegant red and white colour scheme, that's the national colours of Poland, and a very smart 5 formation takeoff. Here's the leader, Captain Jerzy Lehn. And the team coming round for its first fly past. As they go past us, I'm looking for the solo, Lieutenant Maciej Kupiel, to pull up and out of the formation, and actually he's the one in front at the moment. So there he goes for his solo efforts, and the rest of the team shuffle round into box 4. And the one at the front of that now is Captain Jerzy Lehn, the team leader. So here is the solo, Maciej Kupiel. Quite a tiny little engine this aircraft has. It only produces 2,200 pounds of thrust. That's less than half what, for instance, the British Hawk advanced trainer aircraft has. That, of course, makes it more difficult to display these aircraft in formation aerobatics. See the airfield behind Jerzy Lehn there. And still streaming that red and white smoke, the Polish colours. A mirror formation now, one aircraft upside down with the one underneath formating on it. The upside down one is the solo, and he pushes up lots of negative G, the blood rushing to his head away from his feet and his eyes turning pink and his vision getting dimmed at the edges. Not very pleasant at all. The main formation back in what they call a swan shape. There's the airfield again behind the aircraft, and you can see the two aircraft as well behind the leader. They're in the vertical now. We can just see them coming down out of the clouds there. A lovely day for these kind of pictures. Clouds giving dimension to the whole thing. Beautiful paint job that, isn't it? And coming up now, you'll notice he's turning to the left. He wants to turn to the right now, but instead of rolling the right way up, he rolls underneath. And he ends up turning right, so he rolls left and turns right, and that's called a Derry turn, after the famous British test pilot John Derry. The team comes from Dublin in Poland. It's the first training centre for the Polish Air Force. And there are not all that many of these aircraft about because it lost the competition to be the Warsaw Pact standard trainer. It lost it to the Czech L-29, but the Polish Air Force went ahead anyway and built them for its own training purposes. You see the air brakes coming out at the top of the wing there and the flaps underneath at the back of the wing.
Well, a great display there by the pilots of Team Iskra, just 5 of 2,000 aircrew here at a show which never fails to attract huge numbers. Around 180,000 people have paid a visit, bringing record business to the hundreds of stalls and sideshows around the site. What they don't see is the huge amount of preparation that goes into this event. It takes a year to plan, and in the days before the show, RAF Cottesmore has become one of the busiest airfields in Europe, as participating aircraft fly in from all over the world. A large hangar is turned into an arrivals hall with all the usual formalities. The airmen must all be found accommodation. There's even a field hospital equipped to deal with a major emergency. The show is attended by many VIPs. This year, Princess Alexandra is among the royal visitors, along with Prince Faisal of Jordan. Like his father, the late King Hussein, the prince is himself a pilot. Since 1976, the event has been supporting the Royal Air Force Benevolent Fund, but the tattoo itself goes back a little further.
In fact, it started in 1971 at the old Battle of Britain airfield at North Weald in Essex. That was a very small affair. The display lasted 2 hours with only about 40 aircraft there. Then the show moved on to Greenham Common in Berkshire and finally to Fairford, which has been its home since 1985. We're here at Cottesmore while the base at Fairford is being refurbished. Well, with me now are the two former air traffic controllers who founded this show, Paul Bowen and Tim Prince, and in fact, they've been running it ever since. Paul, in those early days, did you ever think it would become like this?
No, I don't think we could have ever imagined. It's way beyond our expectations from where it all began at Northfield in 1971, both in size and also the way the whole event has changed from not just being an air show, but perhaps truly a day out for all the family. As
you say, it's changed, Tim, to be so much more than a show. It's like a huge reunion for air crews from all over the world. You both must have made some enormous friends over the years.
We have. It's been quite incredible. You look back to the 1970s and we see young pilots who bought aeroplanes and got caught up with the spirit of the tattoo with all our volunteers who help us run it. And they're now coming back as chiefs of the air arms that now participate. So they've got a really good understanding, and as a consequence, we've got so many more aircraft participating over the years. Yes, some absolutely great friends.
Well, at that first air tattoo 30 years ago, who would have even dreamt that an aircraft like this would even have existed, let alone appeared in public at an air show? It's the top secret F-117A stealth fighter of the United States Air Force, but is being flown here by an RAF pilot, squadron leader Link Taylor. Link, this is a hell of a treat for someone like you, isn't it?
Absolutely fantastic. It's a real privilege. It's great to fly.
How did you get on board with this?
I received a telephone call one day. I was hiking in Scotland, top of a mountain, and they said, do you want to go to the States to fly the 117? And I chatted to my wife very briefly and phoned the guy straight back.
But it is highly secretive. What are the kind of handling characteristics?
It actually handles just like a fighter. It's got a very good flight control system. It's excellent roll rate, good response. Just flies very well indeed.
Fun to display?
Excellent display. Really nice handling qualities. And in front of a crowd as big as this, superb.
Thank you very much indeed. Let's take a look at that display right now.
Well, it's a shame really that we don't get a chance to see those handling characteristics, because all these aircraft do in their display is a fast pass and a slow pass and then what they call an arcing pass, so you get to see the underside of the aircraft. Nonetheless, it is wonderful to see this here because this is such a historic aeroplane. And of course the point about stealth is that these aircraft are virtually invisible to radar, So if you fly them at night, you're almost guaranteed to take your enemy by surprise, as the Iraqis found out on the first night of the Gulf War. Extraordinary futuristic shape. Even the exhausts of the engines are shrouded, so you can hardly see where the jet exhausts come out. And the point of this aircraft, the way it becomes stealthy, is it's all flat facets. There are no curves on this aircraft at all, and no vertical lines closer than 30 degrees to the vertical. And in order to give it the good handling characteristics that we heard about, it has to have fly-by-wire. Very complex computers give it that good handling. Now, quite different science was applied to the next aircraft, which is the stealth bomber. Instead of having flat bits and straight lines like this aircraft, it's all made of complex curves. And here it is, escorted as ever when we see it flying in this part of the world by 2 F-15 fighters. And that's said to be because anybody looking at this on radar wouldn't be able to tell which were the F-15s and which was the B-2, so they couldn't say exactly how stealthy the B-2 was. Now, this flight is at the midpoint of a 20-hour round trip from the B-2's base at Whiteman Air Force Base in Missouri. There's that extraordinary WVW trailing edge shape. Like something out of science fiction, but here it is for real, and they're going to buy some more of them probably. As it goes away, you can see how thin it is, and it just shows that when it's coming towards you or going away, it is actually very difficult to see with your eye, never mind on radar. Now, this aircraft, with the weapons that it carries on board, can hit 16 different targets in one sortie, in all types of weather. So it's very productive. So even with the price tag of around $2 billion each, when you compare the B-2 with other available weapon systems, it's very good value. That was the amazing B-2. This is its predecessor, the B-1B, the Lancer. Amazing power from those 4 enormous GE engines. More than 30,000 pounds of thrust from each of them. A swing wing aeroplane. The wings are in the fully forward position at the moment. Later we'll see them swept back. Although this is of a different generation to the B-2, it is actually quite stealthy, partly low observable, as they say. It has a radar signature that's about 100th the size of what you get off a B-52. And here's the captain, Major Mike Eliasson, in the left-hand seat, working quite hard during the display. And here's the aircraft coming by in a fast flypast with its wings swept to the 67-degree sweep-back position, different shape. Back with the wings fully forward, and all of the low-speed handling devices droops at the front of the wings, and huge flaps there at the back of the wings. All of that increases the curvature of the wing and gives it more lift at low speed. This aircraft comes from the 34th Bomb Squadron at Mountain Home Air Force Base in Idaho. It was actually this unit that conducted the Doolittle raid, which was the revenge for Pearl Harbor. If you've seen that film, you'll have seen the men from this squadron conducting that raid. Right up to date now with the B-1B, and this is an aircraft that the crews really like. It started out with a rather bad reputation, but it's now very successful, although it is said that the US Air Force is going to sell some of these off in order to buy more B-2s.
Well, obviously, it's only experienced pilots who get to fly an aircraft like that. But first, they face long periods of training on something less complex, like a jet trainer. And there are scores of training aircraft, jet, propeller and helicopter. And here's a look at some of those in the display.
Well, let's start at the beginning. This is the aircraft from the Joint Elementary Flying Training School. This is the Slingsby Firefly. It's very modern, despite the fact that it's just a little piston engine aeroplane. It's made of composite materials, and it's flown today absolutely beautifully, in fact in prize-winning form, by Captain Alan Wade. This is one of the parts of military flying that's been contracted out to civilian companies. This is run by a company called HCS. So Captain Alan Wade is a civilian instructor, but he instructs all of the pilots in elementary flying for all three services. The bright yellow colour scheme designed to make it highly visible. Fixed undercarriage, he doesn't have to worry about retracting that. And coming up next, a flick manoeuvre. The aircraft is momentarily out of control. It's auto-rotating, but Alan Wade soon picks it up and has it pointing in exactly the direction he wants when it comes out of the multiple flick manoeuvre. And the next stage is the basic flying training. And this is done for a lot of the service pilots at No. 1 Flying Training School at RAF Linton-on-Ouse. And this is the Tucano. Now, although this also has a propeller, like the Firefly, this is a turboprop engine. So it's a jet engine driving a propeller. Different colour scheme. These aircraft are all painted black, because black is actually supposed to be quite a conspicuous colour for an aircraft in the air. Now this is the Dutch version of the same sort of aircraft. This is also turboprop, but this is the Pilatus PC-7 of the Royal Netherlands Air Force. This is Captain Kees van Vark from the Royal Military School of the Netherlands Air Force. That's the basic flying training done with. Now we're on to the advanced flying trainers. And this is the joint product of France and Germany, the Dassault Dornier Alpha Jet, and this is what the Belgians use for their advanced training. This is the equivalent of the British Hawk, built about the same time, the main difference being that this one has two engines, whereas the Hawk has only one. We shall see the Hawk in a moment. As always, the Belgian aircraft are beautifully turned out for these shows. Now the British Hawk, also in a fairly eye-catching colour scheme. It's the basic black that we saw before, but it has these wiggly lines on it, and those are intended to signify the air combat and the interweaving trails of the aircraft fighting in the air. This display is by Flight Lieutenant Pete Sharp. He's from 208 Squadron, which is the Hawk Advanced Training Squadron at RAF Valley in Anglesey. Hawk has been outstandingly successful for its manufacturer. Used to be British Aerospace, now BAE Systems. They've sold it all round the world, even to the United States of America, which is very rare.
Just some of the many training aircraft here at the show. We're now going to turn our attention to something a little more warlike in the shape of the McDonnell Douglas F-15C jet fighter. One of them has been giving the most fantastic solo display here, flown by Major Dan Blue of the United States Air Force. Well, Dan dared to take one of our cameras on board for a most spectacular ride, so let's join him.
Good 7 to 8 G pull right there. Stand it straight up on the tails. As you're looking back, there's about 3,000 feet. Roll left to turn right, a little air show thing there. And now coming back in for the high G turn. I'll bring this pass in about 400 to 430 miles an hour and try to demonstrate the high G turn capability of the Eagle. Basically a nice tight turn, the type of turn you'd use against a surface-to-air missile if it was shot at you in combat, or if a fighter rolled into your 6, you'd lay a brake turn on them to try to deny a missile weapons employment zone. And max performance turn like right here, that's about 9 Gs. And that hurts, pushes you way down into the seat and sweat pouring down into your eyes. Now just looking back here, trying to pick up the show line. Backing off to about 6 to 7 Gs here towards the end as the airspeed runs off. And then as I roll out, pull it right back up into the vertical climb. A little showmanship here, just a little roll inverted, push negative. You can see me push up against the top of the canopy there. Split us back down here. Showcase some of the Eagle's climb capability. You know, back in 1972, the F-15 set a time to climb record by soaring from the surface to 12 miles in just under a minute. And just kind of give you a crowd a first-hand view of that record-setting power right here by doing that vertical climb. Put it in about 450 miles an hour. Full afterburner and then a 9G pull into the vertical. That spices it up a bit here, full stick deflection, aileron roll. And you can see RAF Cottesmore kind of fading behind me there. Concentrating on the flight instruments displayed in the heads-up display there. The inner ear is kind of going a little crazy there. And roll out about 15,000 feet right there, about 3 miles up or so in that short time. And that's the F-15 demonstration.
Dan blew high on the F-15. Well, we saw the Belgian Alpha jet beautifully turned out a couple of minutes ago. Here are 8 more of them equally immaculate. Because this is the Patrouille de France, the French national aerobatic team, one of the world's great full-time professional formation teams. Well, let's maintain the French connection in this UK show. This is the Mirage 2000, the French Air Force's current air defence and ground attack fighter, an outstandingly successful aeroplane, highly manoeuvrable with its fly-by-wire systems. Its role is about to be taken over by the Rafale, but the pilots of these aeroplanes will be very sorry to see it go. Captain Pascal Chauvin flying it for us today of the 2-5 Ile-de-France Squadron at Orange. The delta shape there making it very distinguishable from the next aircraft that we're going to see, which is also a Mirage, but of a rather different generation. The Mirage F1 first flew in 1973, and in fact the French Air Force don't fly it anymore, but this one is from the Spanish Air Force, 141 Squadron at Albacete in Spain. Captain Pascual Soria. The F1 was also very successful for the Dassault company, sold to all sorts of different companies ranging from Ecuador and Greece through Iraq and Kuwait to Sudan and Jordan. It's quite an interesting situation for Dassault because their earlier jets had been Deltas, but they decided to go back to this more conventional wing because in those days it was more manoeuvrable, and it was only with the advent of fly-by-wire systems that they were able to get back to Delta plan forms with the Mirage 2000 and still remain highly agile.
This air show always likes to celebrate anniversaries, and this time several venerable aircraft are having important birthdays. Perhaps the best known of all is the Lancaster. It first flew exactly 60 years ago and went on to become the most important heavy bomber of World War II. Just 2 Lancasters remain in airworthy condition. This one is flown by the RAF's Battle of Britain Memorial Flight. Slightly younger, the Hawker Hunter is celebrating its 50th birthday. This one has a rather unusual colour scheme for a fighter. Its owner calls it Misdemeanor. It's in a static display, but despite its age, there are still some Hunters flying.
The other weekend we were treated to the fabulous sight of no fewer than 15 Hunters flying in formation over Kemble, and what a sight for sore eyes that was, particularly for those of us of an age to remember when the Hawker Hunter was in frontline service with the RAF. Well, I certainly remember that time, and so does this man, because he was flying them in frontline service. He was also in that formation and leading the display this year here at the IAT. Rod, what's so special to you about the Hunter?
Oh, it's a great aeroplane. Pilot's aeroplane, very forgiving, a delight to fly. And unfortunately, I'm totally biased. I've been flying it for about 30 years on and off.
And what makes the aircraft so special to... I mean, I think in private hands, there are some 30 in private hands. I just wonder why it's so special to so many people.
Well, it is a classic aeroplane. It's got beautiful handling. It gives you plenty of warning before it before it does anything nasty. It's not going to stall on you without at least telling you beforehand it's going to do it. It's a relatively straightforward aeroplane from the systems point of view, and it is possible with a deal of time for civilian pilots to fly this aeroplane, and a number have flown it successfully solo.
So here it is, the wonderful sight of the Hunter taking off. This one actually comes from Switzerland, and it's very eye-catching colour scheme. The Swiss flew the Hunter more recently, operationally, than the British did, and there's a thriving Hunter society over there. And 3 of the aircraft at the Royal International Air Tattoo today are from Switzerland. But here is Rod in his office, on takeoff with the other aircraft beside him, and we saw his fighting cock motif on the helmet there. He also has the checkered scarf, and those colours are actually of 43 Squadron, which is the same squadron that this particular aircraft that he's flying came from. And here are the 5 of them flying together in formation. 3 single-seat fighters and 2 two-seat trainers. Hunter was supersonic. It could do Mach 1.2, that's 1.2 times the speed of sound. Well, it could certainly do it in a dive anyway. But of course, supersonic flight is not allowed at an air show. So why don't we let Rod Dean take up the story from here?
It's quite a wide formation. I've got Boz Robinson immediately on my right in a PR11, and Uelis outside there in the solo Swiss aeroplane. And on the left-hand side, I've got two T7s, two T68s rather, the Swiss T68s. We'll be rolling out shortly from this turn and going back into a descent to get back down to 500 feet and accelerate again to about 330 to 350 knots. Just call the rollout there, and you'll gradually see that there's the bank coming off slowly, nice and gently. Quick check as to where the runway is, how we're doing on datum, quick check of speed, and a right turn to put us back onto the runway heading. Just about crowd centre now. You'll see some parked aircraft, I guess, as we go over the aircraft static park, operational park, and rolling out wings level. Just approaching the end of the display line. There it is. I call the brake for Ueli, and he pitches up vertically to start his solo display. There he goes in the background, and I take the rest of the formation, climbing to a safe height, a couple of thousand feet, and easing gently round the back of the crowd area to hold with the other 4 aircraft while Ueli does his solo display.
So this is the solo display of Uli Leutert, or Ueli as Rod calls him, in this very distinctively painted Swiss Hunter. All 4 of the Swiss pilots actually work for Swissair, the airline, for their day jobs. And they're also part-time instructors for the Swiss Air Force, and they train pilots using the PC-7 or PC-9 turboprop aircraft. So for them to be able to get back into a Hunter is obviously very exciting. Interesting that this aeroplane is 50 years old. Things have moved on quite a lot in that half century.
Well, there's plenty of really fast stuff here at Cottesmore. You know, there's an awful lot to be said for just taking it nice and gently. Well, I'm on board the Spirit of Europe airship, a very sedate way to travel. This A60 lightship is powered by 2 70-horsepower piston engines, which use around 5 gallons of fuel an hour. That's less than the average single-engine light aircraft. The gondola sits beneath 69,000 cubic feet of helium, which is lighter than air, and unlike the earlier hydrogen-filled airships, it's totally safe. Top speed is about 50 miles an hour. It can hover, and it's far quieter than a helicopter. During the show, the airship is being kept at Leicester Airfield, around 20 minutes flying time from Cottesmore. Now, this is not an aircraft you can operate by yourself. It takes a whole team of people on the ground to secure it. But being lighter than air has many advantages.
Well, we're very lucky if we have an engine failing, because we can stay airborne and we can maintain speed with one engine. Obviously, it's very different, fundamentally different to a fixed-wing aircraft, because we can stay up there even when we don't have 2 engines. So our biggest thing is, if we lost 2 engines, which I'm pleased to say has never happened, we're actually at the mercy of the wind. So we will free balloon, very much like a hot air balloon, and that's where our ground team comes into play. Our support vehicles will then chase the airship, and we'll land it on the mast, as you see here. So we're very fortunate that if we do encounter engine problems, we will still stay airborne.
Well, here at Cottesmore, the airship has been giving a display. Compared with conventional aircraft, it's all rather slow, but it does have an impressive angle of climb.
Yes, it's 30 degrees. It's about twice the rate of a normal commercial airliner. Well, steering it's by yaw, conventionally by the rudder pedals, to press right for a right turn, converse for left. But for the pitch, to climb, I pull back on this wheelchair-like thing here. The elevators are controlled by this.
And what are the kind of things when you're flying that you have to be aware of and that you have to constantly monitor that you wouldn't have to in a normal aeroplane?
Helium pressure predominantly. It's really the only different. We have a helium and ballon pressure. Helium pressure is our lifeline, so we need to keep this up.
Now, Amelia Earhart, Amy Johnson, Jean Batten, all famous names in aviation. In fact, over the years, women have played a huge part in the evolution of flight. This year at Cottesmore, there are literally dozens of women who've been involved in flying in one way or another. They're gathered here at the moment for a photo call. The show pays tribute to them. In World War II, there was such a shortage of pilots that women were brought in to fly Spitfires, Hurricanes and even bombers. They didn't fly in combat, but played an important role delivering aircraft to their squadron bases. Diana Bonato Walker joined the Air Transport Auxiliary in 1941. She flew 46 types of aircraft and more than 200 different Spitfires. Now 83, she recalls the RAF as being a male-dominated world, but they didn't mind having women around.
Whenever we took an airplane anywhere, they didn't mind who brought it because they were so pleased to have their airplane. And we took them not always to the squadrons, we took them generally from the factory to the maintenance unit where it had something done to it. And sometimes we got shot at by our own side by mistake, and sometimes by the enemy.
Annette Hill, who's 82, flew for just 4 years in the 1940s, logging almost 500 flying hours. She worked mostly for the Fleet Air Arm, ferrying aircraft to the Scottish Islands. On one occasion, she recalls getting lost in cloud as she tried to follow another aircraft.
I was given a martinet, but it was the first time I'd ever flown it. And I thought I wouldn't go up. The Met Office said that the cloud base was very low, etc. But the other RAF boy who had another one to go to the same place, he said to me, "Never mind, Annette. You go on, I'll go up first and you come up and follow me and I'll take you up there," you see. So, needless to say, brave that I am, I did this. But when I was taking off, I swung very, very much to the left with this stroke arm. And when I got above the cloud base, I looked around and I couldn't see anybody. I couldn't see hair or sight of him. And I remembered my instructor saying, if you get lost, because the cloud was down, I couldn't see a thing. And I remember the instructor saying to me, if you get lost, go north and south, don't go east and west, because we're longer than we are wide. And I eventually, and the tears were rolling down my face because I was lost. And eventually I found a hole in the cloud and came down and found myself and landed. And he was at the end of the runway, my friend, and he just said, "No, that was easy, wasn't it?" Just goes to show how brave you are.
Among several current women pilots at the show is Sergeant Julie Wiles of the Army Air Corps. She's flying with the Blue Eagles helicopter display team.
It is a dream job. You know, to be paid to do something that I absolutely love is brilliant. You know, lots of people pay to do this. I think lots of people would pay a lot of money to actually go and sit in during the display, but sadly they're not able to. You know, so it's brilliant.
Julie was taught to fly by her father, a former Army major, who's now a civilian helicopter instructor. He says attitudes to women pilots in the armed forces have changed enormously in the last few years.
Until 15 years ago, women in the Army Air Corps had not even been considered, and or perhaps considered and dismissed. But then they started flying. Julie was already in the Army, so she applied to come flying, and very luckily I was able to teach her to fly as well.
Well, the Blue Eagles are interesting, not only because they're a helicopter display team, and there certainly aren't many of those in the world, but also because they fly mixed aircraft types within the team. There are 4 Gazelles and a Lynx in the team. These are the Gazelles, and there's the Lynx. And here's Julie lifting off in one of the Gazelles. And 4 Gazelles here, coming up with the first split. Julie's had an interesting army career. She joined Queen Alexandra's Royal Army Nursing Corps and actually served as a combat medical technician during the Gulf War. And she went on to qualify as a registered nurse after that. And here's the Lynx in the hands of Captain Ray Turner. Now this is amazing. This is actually a loop. The helicopters aren't supposed to be able to do this, but the Lynx can. And gazelles doing their synchronized swimming bit. They do look quite like little fish, don't they? Sergeant Julie Wiles then, upholding the Royal International Air Tattoo's theme of women in aviation.
Well, another woman pilot arrived at the show in a Harrier. For this short journey, Polly Vasher was a passenger, but earlier this year she made an epic solo voyage around the world in her own Piper Dakota. Polly was raising money to fund flying scholarships for the disabled. Her tiny plane carried the names of hundreds of sponsors who donated money to a scheme founded by the late King Hussein of Jordan and supported by the Royal International Air Tattoo. Polly's trip was a real adventure, but there were some anxious moments. On the longest leg between Hawaii and California, her single engine suddenly stopped.
It was easy to deal with because I'd just run out of fuel in the auxiliary tank. But for a few seconds, my heart missed quite a few beats. In Indonesia, I was going from Jakarta to Yogyakarta and went into an electric storm, and that was pretty horrific, especially as the mountains were quite high and I didn't want to go plunging into a mountain. So I did a 180, turned around and went back to Jakarta and spent a night in Jakarta and went on the next day. Everywhere I went, I was warmly welcome. But of course, you see, that was because I had this other agenda for the Flying for the Disabled. I was trying to promote awareness of the Royal International Air Tattoo flying scholarships for the disabled. And that seemed to really strike a sort of light with everybody. They really were interested. And everywhere I went, I was met with such, warmth.
For those determined to take up flying, even serious disabilities needn't close the door. At this show, a dozen pilots have been presented with their wings by Prince Faisal. Among them, Chris Grace, who learned to fly in South Africa. Back in England, his training was soon put to the test. As he took off from Shoreham Airfield, his engine failed.
Very suddenly, at 500 feet, the engine went extremely rough. So I had to stick the nose down because I wasn't able to maintain altitude. To see what my options were. First looking at the water, which I didn't really fancy, and as the engine was still running at that time, I chose to turn back towards the field and hope that I would just be able to maintain sufficient altitude to get there. But the engine quit altogether, forcing me to select an alternate, which was a very small field beside the railway line, which I managed to turn to and bring it into land.
Well, now back to the flying programme and to arguably the most colourful national display team in every sense. Flying 10 Air Macchi MB339 jet trainers and celebrating their 40th anniversary here at the show. They are Italy's Frecce Tricolore.
Frecce Tricolore, meaning the three coloured arrows, the red, white and green of the Italian national flag. They call this the biggest Italian flag in the business. And in fact, this is the biggest military jet team in the world. They're the only people flying 10 aircraft in formation. And what close formation it is, too. Guaranteed to excite the crowds are the Frecce. This is a fairly modern jet trainer, but it does not have swept wings. And actually that means that it's quite good in formation. It's slightly easier for the pilots to formate on each other because they have these straight wings. Here they've changed formation, and the man at the back of the Diamond 9 there is Captain Dimitri Mazzaroli. He's the solo, and he'll split off.
the Frecce Tricolore, pride of Italy. Now, as well as hosting the Royal International Air to 2 for these past 2 years, RAF Cottesmore is home to the Harrier, along with RAF Wittering just down the road. There are currently 3 squadrons of GR7s based here, but from 2003, the Royal Navy's Sea Harriers will relocate here from Yeovilton, thus completing the Joint Force Harrier lineup. Well, both types of Harrier are displaying here this weekend. First up, Lieutenant Commander Russ Eatwell is going to describe his display in the Sea Harrier for us with the aid of our cockpit camera.
And here we go, full power, on in 2.4 seconds, 90 knots, hand to the nozzle lever and stow, immediately banking round to the right, 70 degrees I'm looking for here, as I rotate the nozzles to 20 degrees. I still need some reaction control so that I can get to nose authority as I pitch up now to 45 degrees. Up we go, yes, line looks good there. Airspeed's building through about 250 knots, climbing through 1,000 feet. Actually having a bit of a faff now. The oxygen has just had a restriction, so I'm trying to get the oxygen nozzle off my jacket. That's done now, so I'm looking in towards the airfield. 2,000 feet here, there's my line. Accelerating the aircraft now to 290 knots. Don't want to go above 300 because I want to maintain full flap for the tight turn. Setting up for the inverted pass. 500 feet for this pass. Accelerating, now I can go to mid-flap. I know I'm going to make the turn, looking for my line, the fast jet line, 230 meter line, just out to my right. I'm within the limits, check and roll. Holding now, -1G, just looking out through the top of the canopy, gauging my height. There's the end of the crowd line, just a little bit of a push now as I roll and idle. Need to slow the aircraft down now to 290 knots, so again I can put the full flap down for my pitch up. Looking for an apex height of 3,600 feet here. The aircraft is decelerating through 250 knots, full power, looking over the top for the display line. Just see the airfield coming through there, lining up with the northern taxiway, and the engine goes to idle. Rolling onto the display line, nozzles now back to about 50 degrees. This is helping me to slow down. I want to keep about 200 knots here so I get some penetration towards the field, but I'll shortly be rotating those to 98 degrees, that's through the vertical, to help me slow down to the hover. And I'm looking at crowd center line. There's a little VSTOL pad there which I'm eyeing up. I'm at the northern end of the runway line, that's 100 meters, good. And full braking stop. Now putting the water injection on, we put this onto the front face of the power turbine to cool the engine. It adds about 1,000 pound more thrust as well. So that will flow for 90 seconds, just aiding me in my task of hovering here. As we slow down towards 30 knots, just putting the nozzles back to their 81 degrees, i.e. the vertical, and 20 degrees angle of bank. There's a VSTOL pad just out there to the right hand side. That is crowd center. So I'm going to turn just to the west of crowd center onto the display line 230 for the main runway. Bring the aircraft to a halt here using a little bit of the braking stop, so they go to about 90 degrees now. There, the 2 fuel lights coming on there means I've got 1,500 pounds of fuel left. I'm happy with that. 200 feet my height, so all the public can see beyond the tents, and I'm now pirouetting to the right. About 20 knots of rearward speed. I'm just feeding in the yaw now. Little bit of nozzle to keep my momentum going. Through crowd center there. There's the stealth. I'm nicely set up and I've done a 360.
Well, that's Lieutenant Commander Russ Eatwell and the Sea Harrier. And this is the more modern and in fact larger version of the Harrier flown by the Royal Air Force. This is the GR7 or AV-8B version, and this one is in the hands of Flight Lieutenant Dave Bradshaw. You can see the squadron crest of 20 Reserve Squadron, that's the training unit for the Harrier on the side there, and you can see the 4 columns of jet thrust supporting this aircraft as it hovers. Now you can see the jet nozzles actually pointing forward as Dave Bradshaw tips the aircraft down And then when he gets it descending, he moves the lever and the nozzle goes slightly backwards, so he gets some forward speed on from that hovering position so that he can touch down on the runway for a very, very short landing.
Well, the Harrier has long been a favourite at air shows all over the world, but it's quite an old aircraft now. In fact, it's been flying for more than 30 years. But this is the new aircraft, which could eventually replace it. This is a plastic model of the new Joint Strike Fighter, which is being developed in the United States. Two companies, Lockheed Martin and Boeing, are fighting it out for a multi-billion-dollar contract to build it. Well, I'm joined now by the head of the Lockheed project, and that's Tom Burbage. Tom, is this really the fighter of the future?
This is the fighter of the future for the United States and for the United Kingdom and for a number of other countries that are interested right now.
Now, this aircraft does take off vertically like the Harrier, but why has it taken so long to build an aircraft that is quite similar to the Harrier?
Actually, it's quite different than the Harrier. We bring in all of the technologies of the F-22, and this airplane does take off vertically and land vertically. So it's got all of the capabilities of a Harrier, but it's a much bigger airplane. The demonstration aircraft are doing marvelously. We've demonstrated an Air Force version of the airplane, which we call our conventional takeoff and landing. We have a Navy version, which has completed a remarkable flight test program with the Navy down at Patuxent River, and we're just about to complete our Stovall version, or our Harrier type aircraft flight test program.
Now, this is a big contract with big competition from Boeing. Is Lockheed going to win it?
We think so. We think we've got the right airplane and the right team, so we think so.
JSF is not the only new fighter around. This is Europe's next generation dream machine, the Eurofighter Typhoon. Eurofighter has appeared at previous air tattoos. It's expected to enter RAF service next year, which puts it years ahead of the Joint Strike Fighter. However, JSF will certainly be more capable. For one thing, its technology is more stealthy, meaning it'll be more difficult to see on radar. And its ability to take off vertically, as well as being supersonic, makes it more versatile. Up to 3,000 will eventually be in service with the US Armed Forces.
The key to this is that it has to be sophisticated but affordable. So on this aircraft you will find the very latest in radar technology, cockpit systems, stealth technology, which is a key to making this work, while also being affordable. They're talking in terms of a $30 to $40 million price tag, which may sound like a lot, but in fighter terms that's rather a bargain basement price if it can be achieved.
Whoever wins the contract, it'll be some time before we see the real JSF at air shows. 30 years after the Harrier first flew, vertical takeoff is still not easy to achieve.
Even though the Harrier aircraft that you see flying at air shows like this looks easy, just what does it do? It goes up and down. It's actually very, very difficult, and the pilot workload in an aircraft like that is immensely complicated. One of the things that the JSF designers have been working very, very hard to do is to simplify that control method, to find a quick and easy way of moving from forward to vertical flight and back again, so that the really hard jobs, landing on an aircraft carrier at night, things like that can be made as easy as possible. That's one very big problem for the guys on this aircraft to solve.
JSF, of course, in the future. This is very much a blast from the past. This is the MiG-21, and strangely, this is called Lancer. We've already had the B-1 Lancer. This is the MiG-21 Lancer, and that means that it's a modernization of a very old airframe. This aircraft type actually first flew in 1955, but it's been brought up to date with all sorts of modern electronics by the Elbit company of Israel. They've made this major upgrade, and it's still a successful aircraft for the Romanian Air Force, and this is the first time we've had the Romanian Air Force flying in a display at a Royal International Air Tattoo. More than 11,000 MiG-21s were produced, so an outstandingly successful aircraft for the Warsaw Pact countries. Flown today for us by Lieutenant Commander Lorian Anastasov. Another outstandingly successful aircraft and of a similar generation. This is the F-4 Phantom. First flew in 1958. More than 5,000 of these were delivered to many Western air arms. Not many of them left still operating today. This one comes from the German Air Force. They're keeping these going until they take delivery of Eurofighter Typhoon. You can see its naval antecedents with the hook dangling from the back of the aircraft there. That's to stop it on carrier decks, but can also be used with runway arrestor gears. No fly-by-wire here. Just a high nose-up attitude with the pilot flying along, controlling it completely manually. And of course he can't see where he's going with the aircraft tipped up like this. And now Captain Ralph Hinkler piles the power on the two big General Electric engines, nearly 18,000 pounds of thrust in reheat. Well, that was what McDonnell Douglas built all that time ago. This is what has taken over from it. This is the McDonnell Douglas FA-18, but of course is now called the Boeing FA-18, the company having been taken over. And this is the version that the Canadians fly, and it's called the CF-18. Captain Lee Vaughan in control. Midas to his chums, because apparently everything he touches turns to gold. This is a very successful and highly agile aeroplane. This has all the fly-by-wire attributes. The ability to fly slow, even upside down and slow. And here's the similar generation European aircraft, the Tornado, made by the company Panavia. Its wings fully swept back. Shortly we shall see the wings starting to come forward. This is the air defense fighter version of the Tornado, belonging to number 56 Squadron, 56 Reserve Squadron, meaning it's the OCU, the training unit for Tornado fighter pilots. There are the wings in the forward position. And the Germans also fly the Tornado aircraft. This one is from Naval Air Wing number 2 at Eggebek in northern Germany, just by the Danish border. This is an anti-shipping aircraft, carries the Cormoran missile in a high-speed fly past, near the speed of sound. Well, the company that produced this Jaguar aircraft was a forerunner of the Panavia company. Panavia was a multinational company. Seppicat that produced this aircraft was just joint British and French, joint between BAC of Britain and Breguet of France. Produced a very successful small ground attack fighter, seen plenty of operational use in the Gulf and more recently in Kosovo. Flight Lieutenant Paul Binns flying the Jaguar of number 16 Reserve Squadron at RAF Cottesmore. No fly-by-wire here, just a simple small light aircraft. And here's the French Air Force version of the Jaguar. These are both two-seaters, flown by Capitaine Etienne Viau and Lieutenant Xavier Fabre, and flown in almost welded together formation. These aircraft are from number 17 Provence Squadron from Saint-Dizier. And boy, do they like to fly close together. Stop! In fact, when you see them in the distance, it's difficult to tell whether there is actually one or two aircraft there. We're looking towards the aircraft of the leader, Etienne Viau. Now, this is his second season in the team. He was the number 2 before. Now he gets to be formated on by Lieutenant Xavier Fabre, who sticks to him like a second skin. see the aircraft has two engines, two Turbomeca Rolls-Royce Adour engines. Basically the same engine that the Hawk has, but this one has reheat and puts the power up to 6,500 pounds of thrust from each engine. So the power to weight ratio is pretty good in the Jaguar, and that makes it very good for this kind of close formation flying. Now up to date with one of the most modern aircraft in current service. This is the Saab BAE Systems Gripen. And this one is flown by the Swedish Air Force, the Flygvapnet, based at F7 base at Såtenäs. Captain Martin Birkfeldt flying this highly manoeuvrable fly-by-wire aircraft. And it has such good low-speed handling that it doesn't need anything like reverse thrust or braking parachutes to slow it down on landing, but it does use its canard wing. That's the sort of tailplane at the front of the wing. You see the great blades tipping up there to slow the aircraft down for a short tactical landing. And in fact, it can land on roads. The Swedes often use roads as dispersed airfields. And now the most common and numerous Western fighter, the F-16. This is a European-built version of the American aircraft, and this one belongs to number 31 Squadron of the Belgian Air Force, flown by Commandant Danny Meersman. Another fly-by-wire fighter, and demonstrating its ability to pull lots of G with those smoke generators on the wingtips. Those are called smoke winders because they fit where the Sidewinder missiles would normally fit. Always a favourite at air shows is the F-16. It's elegant and it performs extremely well in front of a crowd, managing tight manoeuvres that never take it very far away. And in fact there is another European F-16 at the show. This is Captain Richard Buys, nicknamed Tomba. He's from Valkuil Air Base of the Royal Netherlands Air Force, and he talks us through his display.
Here I'm in the takeoff, looking for the display center point, rotating at 125 knots and starting a turn right away for the min radius turn, 360 degrees around. First correcting for the winds, trying to keep 300 feet here. And of course looking for the display line and the center point again to end up exactly in the middle. Continuing the turn and then reposition myself for the slow speed pass over the runway. Slow speed pass done with about 105 knots. Max full aft stick, so the only thing you can control your altitude with is with the power. And the biggest challenge is keeping the aircraft level. See the leading edge flaps going down, which means slow speed. And of course with a lot of crosswind, this is the time to make corrections in the beginning and not during the display over the line. Almost at the end of the runway, pushing the throttle to AB and climbing out. Trying to keep the airspeed constant with about 140 knots, climbing up all the way to about 5,000, 4,500 feet. Aircraft is bleeding speed. I'm looking for the alignment with the runway, looking for center point. Now this time I'm talking with the coach about the repositioning maneuver, see if everything works well with the winds, the high altitude winds. And when I get the call, I put the smoke on. 2 seconds afterwards, I start the spiral down, max full aft stick, and starting the roll. Smoke goes off, aligning myself with the runway again. going all the way back to the end.
Well, the RAF has been looking to the future for some time with the most up-to-date transport aircraft in the world today, the C-130J high-tech Hercules, which only entered service just earlier this year, and coming right up to date, the Boeing C-17 Globemaster III. This is the second of 4 that will be delivered to number 99 Squadron at Brize Norton, and it's so new it hasn't even entered full RAF service. The C-17 is already in service with the United States Air Force, which is getting more than 100 of them. It's one of theirs which is taking part in the display. Now, this aircraft is huge. Its wingspan is more than half the length of a football pitch, and it can carry a load of 85 tons. That could be weapons, troops, or humanitarian supplies. For its size, it can fly surprisingly slowly. Here it's doing only about 120 miles an hour, and that's important because it enables the C-17 to land on short, unpaved airstrips. In fact, it can get down and stop in about 500 meters. The whole point of the C-17 is that it fulfills the role of 2 transports. It's fast enough and has the range to cover long distances, but it also gets into places which can't normally accommodate large jet aircraft.
We have the Hercules fleet, which has been the backbone of the Air Force transport for some time now. We're getting the J model, which is new to us, but we've also got the K model Hercules, and they can do the tactical flying, but they can't carry outsized loads. For some time now, the RAF has had to charter aircraft to carry our outsized equipment. So this aircraft is a new capability to the Air Force, and we can carry wheeled vehicles, tracked vehicles, helicopters, all the outsized equipment that the joint services have to wherever they're needed around the world.
Sadly, the RAF's not displaying the aircraft here, it's the US Air Force, but tell me, how do you actually reverse an aeroplane like this without wing mirrors?
What we do is we open the ramp at the back and we put the loadmaster. It's a crew of 3 on this aeroplane, 2 pilots and a loadmaster, and it's a big aircraft. The loadmaster sits on the ramp and he talks us back, and as long as he's chatting, we keep backing. But if he stops chatting, we stop backing because you don't know what you're going to hit. So that's how we do it.
One of the big issues at air shows this year is, of course, safety. Only a few weeks ago, there were 2 fatal crashes at Biggin Hill. Now, as far as the public is concerned, the safety record is excellent. No spectator has been killed at a British air show in nearly 50 years. For pilots to perform at a huge air show like this one, they have to demonstrate their display in front of the Flying Control Committee. Now, if they don't approve it, it doesn't go ahead.
The man in charge is Group Captain Jeff Brindle. He's the one with the regulation RAF moustache. He's here as a kind of air display policeman. Even established acts like the Frecce Tricolori must still win the approval of Jeff and his FCC colleagues.
We look at the participant flying a rehearsal to make sure that he does what he says he's going to do and that he can do it within the constraints laid down. The distance from the crowd line, for instance, 230 meters. For high energy aeroplanes, there's an outer turning limit of 450 meters, and there are minimum heights below which he should not come. And we sit here with our red and yellow cards poised if he busts those minima.
Can you actually stop a display from going forward then if you're not satisfied that it's totally safe?
Oh yes, indeed. We then get air traffic to stop him in his tracks and call him to land. Mercifully, that won't happen. It hasn't happened for quite a long time in my experience.
But Jeff spoke too soon. This aircraft is a MiG-29. It's a Russian-built fighter operated by the German Air Force. In his first display, the pilot, Captain Matthias Lump, gave a faultless performance for our onboard camera. But on day 2, things didn't quite go according to plan. As he came out of a dive, heading towards the crowd, the aircraft seemed dangerously low. Captain Lump applied power and managed to pull out, but he came within 100 feet of the ground. The response from the FCC was instant, and the request was passed to air traffic control.
MiG-1 from the FCC, you are to land.
find out on the ground. We've just been told to instruct you to land.
So Captain Lump cut short his display, a grave embarrassment for him and no doubt some questions to answer.
Of course, the German Air Force has not been flying the MiG-29 very long because they only got hold of them after reunification, because all of the MiG-29s are in the East German Air Force. This one is part of the Hungarian Air Force, and this is flown by Major Jaguar, and he is one of the best jet display pilots in the business, and he has trophies wall to wall to prove it. A neat little touch on the runway there, and the two big Trumansky turbines light up with the afterburners. Huge amounts of power coming out of those. 18,000 pounds of thrust on each of them. Now, although this aircraft is very, very manoeuvrable, it's not fly-by-wire. It's probably the last of the big non-fly-by-wire fighters. It started operational service with the then Soviet Air Force in 1986. And Gyulavari has been flying it since it came into service with the Hungarians just a couple of years later. This aircraft is based with the 2nd Squadron, 59th Tactical Fighter Wing at Keshemet Air Force Base. You can see under the wings there the racks for all the weapons that it can carry. And those could be air-to-air missiles or ground attack bombs or any sort. And also part of the self-defense mechanism that all of these aircraft have is the ability to fire flares. And those flares are there to decoy the missiles that might be attacking the aircraft. Gyulavari demonstrating also its amazing slow speed characteristics, going into a tail slide with the aircraft actually going backwards. An extraordinary display.
Well, although many of the aircraft here have played a role in real-life conflicts, most military flying these days is for training purposes, and for many of the pilots that provides an opportunity for some really exciting flying. Well, taxiing out right now, 4 Hawk trainers, which spend much of their lives carrying out mock attacks on warships. Well, we'll see their display in a moment. But before the show, our cameras went to Cornwall to watch the Hawks in action. Unlike the sweltering conditions at Cottesmore, our visit to the Royal Navy Air Station at Culdrose was accompanied by low cloud and drizzle. The cold front rolling in off the Atlantic had brought atrocious flying conditions, but that didn't stop the men of the Fleet Requirements and Air Development Unit, or FRADU for short, setting off for work. Their Hawks can operate in almost any weather. Today they're going to stage a mock attack on a warship. Moments after takeoff, they're in cloud, but the Hawks climb strongly. Within minutes, they burst into sunshine at 21,000 feet. And it's here that they join forces with a Falcon business jet, specially equipped to simulate an air attack. Those attachments under its wings, which look like missiles, are actually packed with electronic equipment. Meanwhile, in the English Channel, the destroyer HMS Exeter is on exercise. Her crew have been briefed to expect an air attack, but they don't know where it's coming from. In the operations room, things are getting tense.
I've seen our target.
Reset forward, reset up. Forward enough, 56, 55. Update tracking. Reset forward, reset up. 362, forward enough.
30 miles away, the Hawks peel away from the Falcon. On the ship's radar, they now appear to be 2 Exocet missiles released by an enemy aircraft. The destroyer will simulate the launch of her own Sea Dart missiles to intercept the attack. If that doesn't work, her last line of defense will be the guns on deck. The Hawks race in low over the sea. Here they're doing nearly 600 miles an hour. In reality, the ship will have less time to react. The latest missiles travel at 3 times this speed.
The only thing the Hawks can't do is fly at the speed of a real missile. Everything else they do is almost accurate. The profile, which is the most important thing, which gives us the pop-up, if you like, of the missile coming over the horizon, is as realistic as a real missile profile. We, as an air defence platform, will grab any opportunity to train with any aircraft in our vicinity, and we will with any nation. This year alone we've worked with Frenchmen, Dutchmen, the Royal Air Force clearly, and the FRADU assets as well. So yes, FRADU provide an immaculate service and a very useful service, but there are other assets that my specialist warfare officers will use on every opportunity that we can.
The Hawks are operated by a private contractor, but with ex-military pilots. Despite the excitement of this kind of flying, they find it difficult to recruit. Most of FRADU's pilots are nearing the end of their flying careers.
Traditionally, it's been people of about 45 who have decided they no longer wish to be in the military, but don't actually want to go to the airlines, but would like to carry on doing this sort of flying. But that pool of pilots is getting smaller as the Air Force reduces in size, and more recently we've been getting people who've had an extended career in the Air Force, well into their 50s maybe, and we've recruited 5 such gentlemen.
Well, back at the Royal International Air Tattoo, here is the FRADU formation. It's 2 Falcon aircraft and 4 Hawks. They call themselves the Black Sea Hawks and the Falcons. And we're riding in the cockpit with Ken Rhodes in one of the Hawks. And if you think he's keeping a close eye on the Falcons there, well, he probably is, because his fiancée, First Officer Caroline Oakes, is the co-pilot in the 2nd aircraft. Well, the Black Sea Hawks, and taking over the stage now, the 9 Red Hawks of the Royal Air Force Aerobatic Team, the Red Arrows, arriving in what they call Big Battle formation, streaming red, white and blue smoke. They produce that smoke by squirting little bits of diesel fuel into the hot jet exhaust, and to produce the colours they put dye in the fuel. They've changed formation now into Swan. Still all 9 aircraft involved. It's been a big year for the Red Arrows this. They achieved their 3,500th show on the 23rd of June. And on the 1st of July, several promotions in the team. The leader, Squadron Leader Andy Offer, became a wing commander, and 3 of the flight lieutenants, Chris Carter, Miles Garland and Andy Evans, became squadron leaders. So lots of beers all round at the beginning of July for the team. They've changed now into 9 arrow formation. Looking absolutely rock solid. As they bend round towards us, the sun glinting on the tops of the wings. And on the far side of the airfield, changing the formation shape again to what has become their trademark shape, the Diamond 9. And as they bend round this time, you get a good chance to see the arrow markings on the bottom of the aircraft. Wing Commander Andy Offer leading them from the front there, very steady in his turns, so the whole thing becomes slow and graceful for the time being. Another formation change. And now they're in a new formation called Angel of the North, after the huge sculpture statue in Gateshead. And this formation leads them into the split, the 5-4 split. The front 5 aircraft, known as Enid, Enid Blyton's famous 5, split away from the back 4, there for some rather strange and unknown reason known as JIPO. Here are the 5 aircraft of Enid in trail. But for the meantime, we're in the number 2 aircraft of JIPO as Enid come the other way in opposition. In case you're wondering what those wires are in the cockpit canopy, they're actually detonation cords, so that if the pilot has to eject, when he pulls the lever to send his seat out, the cockpit first of all explodes above his head into little pieces so that the seat doesn't have to go through the perspex. Now a fascinating manoeuvre called corkscrew. But the finale of the Red Arrows display is the one that always leaves the crowds shouting for more. This is the Vixen break.
Well, since last year's show, 2 of the most decorated airmen in the history of British aviation have died. Brian Trubshaw was well known at the Air Tattoo, where he was a member of the Flying Control Committee, but he was best known, of course, as the chief test pilot for Concorde. And Johnny Johnson, the RAF's top-scoring fighter ace of World War II, claiming 38 enemy aircraft destroyed. Both these distinguished airmen are remembered at the show, so first a tribute to a true RAF war hero.
Air Marshal Johnny Johnson is remembered with a unique formation, 3 Harriers and his beloved Spitfire. At the display centre, the Spitfire pulls up and out of the formation, signifying the man who does not return from the combat. And Trubby Trubshaw is remembered with a flypast by a VC-10. Sad that it couldn't be Concorde, and even sadder that he died before Concorde flew again. But VC-10 was one of his most important aircraft. He was deeply involved in the development of this aircraft. VC-10 was, of course, a long-range airliner, and now in service with the Air Force as a tanker.
Well, with that tribute to Brian Trubshaw, we're nearing the end of our weekend here at RAF Cottesmore, and this is the 30th anniversary of the Royal International Air Tattoo. Been hot enough for you, Murray?
Certainly has, and of course there have been some great displays, haven't there? Of course, next year the show moves back to Fairford after 2 years here at Cottesmore, so we hope to see you there.
Yes, indeed. But for now, we'll leave you with some more of the sights and sounds of what's been a wonderful weekend here in Rutland. So from RAF Cottesmore and the Royal International Air Tattoo 2001, it's goodbye.
Goodbye.